But when I'm connecting to source, when I'm connecting to my true heart within, it's abstract. And very often I'm like, a 3-year-old could do it. But that's what's so beautiful, because we really came to this earth well equipped with everything we needed. And that's connection.
Yeah. I mean, for everyone else that is going to tune into Cortney's, channel and her social, and then get to experience her artwork, I mean, it's palpable. Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master Sun Quinn, and I have an incredible guest on the podcast today. We've become fast friends, and I'm really excited to have her on this podcast to share her incredible gifts with the world. Cortney Kane Sides. Is that correct?
That's correct. You got it.
Yes, I did.
And
I'm going to put her under the blanket of just an incredible being, rather than giving her a specific title, because being multifaceted, I honestly believe you go way past the expression of a jack of all trade, master of none. You're a master of all, and playing many different the frequency that you put out, that I've observed, and I've been doing this 30 years, is quite something. You have this balance. And so a lot of people tend to get into this sort of space of consciousness, we'll just define it as that, and they have an excess or deficiency of a certain type of like gift. They get a little bit, and then they walk away spending the rest of their life looking for that. I got a glimpse, I need it. And you have really refined your gifts and your skills to be so balanced and high frequency that it's really quite something. And I'm really excited to find out how you did that.
Thank you for that. I love that, master of all inner energy.
Yeah.
I will do that. Thank you, my friend. And I want to say ditto. Your work is incredible. So I appreciate you having me here.
Well, thank you. I'm really grateful that you're here on the podcast. And we love to explore consciousness, which is really, it seems to be a hot button, I would say, right now. And very few people are really, how do I put it, understand that level of consciousness. I always go back to the good old one and only, the GOAT, Bruce Lee, back in the 70s, just before he passed away. He had a few interviews, but it was like he was using that word consciousness. Now, of course, consciousness has been around as the test of time, but in reality, I mean, we're looking at, no one really understood what he was saying back then. And even today, if you and I share with people that we're expressing ourselves with, they're kind of like, help me understand that, because I'm still a little confused.
Right.
But
and is almost something that I think can only be truly known once you really experience it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Well, next thing we want to get to, I want to hear your story, my friend. I really want you to share with our audience how you got to this place, because if I and everyone's experience is different, but if I measured it to mine, someone on your frequency and vibration, you kind of wake up realizing that this has been going on your whole life, and then you go, okay, now I've been given a very clear message that this is what I'm supposed to do with my reincarnation. So I would love to hear your story. The audience would love to hear your story.
Well, thank you. I'll work on I'm an Aquarius. So you know how when we tell our stories are very intricate. I'm kidding. But
Yeah.
I'll give you the most Cliff Note version possible. I was a big feeler. I paint even today. And I typically say in my work, I paint for my clients. And I always say, I feel so much that I feel in color. And when I was young, I was the youngest in the family. And, when the commercial would come on, I was like, oh, crying. Or when the sad movie was coming on and the dog died, I was, hysterical. And I was just such a big feeler and empathic little one, and very artistic and connected, if you will. And when I would walk into people's homes, I could feel things that I couldn't always express verbally. And so I kind of kept those things locked away. I believe I shared those things with my mother, and maybe I have a twin sister. So when I say I'm the youngest, I'm 4 minutes younger than she is. That counted in our family. But what was really interesting is I would start to go to these older places. We lived in a very old home, and I just felt beyond myself, if you will. And
Yeah.
very often when I was young, it felt like fear. I was scared. I couldn't necessarily put, a name or energy to everything that I felt. And many people, I didn't feel free to be able to express that.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
raised Southern Baptist, and I appreciate that connection even today, although I've taken that awareness and expanded beyond. But it wasn't until my mother passed at the age of, I was 15 when she passed. And
I'm so sorry to hear that.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. She came to me in a dream, which I know you've experienced, I'm sure, and many of your, listeners here and watchers. She came to me in a dream about 7 days after her passing and said, "Hi, I love you." And she gave me this hug. And many of you who have experienced such loss understand that when we have that void and that death that happens, it feels like such a deep, dark hole that can't be filled again, right? And so after she came to me in that dream, and after she gave me that hug, I woke up and I knew she was with me. I had a crazy Aunt Sharon, which I'm the crazy aunt now in my family. But I told her about this dream, and I had told my father. He was wonderful about it. But my Aunt Sharon said, "Cortney, I don't believe that was a dream." She said, "I really believe your mother came to you. I really believe she was there." And so I thought, oh, okay, whatever. Well, many years after this, probably another 10 years after, every person that passed from my life came to me in that same way. I wrote it down. I would date it because I was a skeptic. I'm a logical human being. I want fact and I want proof. And many different, homes I lived in, I always felt like the homes I lived in were haunted, which I don't believe that today. It was just because I know I could feel everything, the history, the energy, all of it within that home, and all of the past energy that had also been in that home. And so today I understand that as me just being I could feel at a higher frequency than many people. And so many of those experiences were what felt like scary still to me. And it wasn't until I moved to Phoenix, I was about 25 years old. I'm 46 today, and my anxiety was so high. I was having massive panic attacks, and I knew something was going on, and I was so emotionally like up and down. And that was when I found meditation. That is when I found that, oh my gosh, the reason it felt like fear, the reason I felt like scary, was because everything I felt was always this close to me. It was so enmeshed with my own energy, and meditation helped me learn to breathe
Wow.
everybody's energy out for me to find my own bubble of connection. And I preach this today. I teach this with my clients. And that then is where the paintings, I started to paint and write down the visions that I would receive in those meditations. My loved ones, I was starting to connect with my guides and angels. I started to work for a company called Brain State Technologies. They're no longer around, but it was a neurofeedback company. And this is 15 years ago. And so once working with them, I love science. I like proof. I worked with quantum physicists and neurologists across the planet. And with seeing that my own gifts, my own psychic gifts and abilities, my own mediumship skills, you could measure in the brain. That was all I really needed to, oh my gosh, this is proof. And I had people that I worked with so closely that they can't tell you that they can see that, or then they couldn't. People might today do that. But back then they wouldn't say that because they couldn't say the word healing. They couldn't say the word, that they were
Isn't
trying to
that
get
crazy?
food. And so they would say, yes, that's what that is, Cortney. We can see that the psychic activities happening in the brain, and having so many amazing opportunities to keep learning more helped me gain confirmation that I knew that I needed, not from an outside source, but through my own connection and my own healing. By the way, I believe that goes hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that's brilliant, because the confirmation, as human beings, there is a level of that, you know, over all these decades, you come across people that are the skeptics are the easiest healers. They're the
Mhm.
ones that I see it happen over and over again. I mean, I'd have to say probably thousands of times, because it's just you don't you so far removed from the idea of, and
Mhm.
then they're so in tune on an empath level where their sensory perception is really tuned in. So
Mhm.
they don't realize that. They're like, yeah, right. Whoa, whoa. And so the amount of times I've had like people have incredible, what they could define as miracle healings, and then they'll literally go out of their way for 6 months after the fact, attempting to unravel what has happened, whether it's, connective tissue healing, removal of cancer, all
Mm,
the, you name the physical stuff. I've seen it. I've seen gangrenous feet return to pinky flesh color within 40 minutes. um,
mm.
and I'm like, I don't know what, I honestly, that first time that I experienced it, I looked at it, I was like, I don't know, inside I'm thinking I need to rush this person to a hospital right. And they're like, "What's going on? I just haven't been able to feel my foot lately." Because, and the first time it happened, I was like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
I don't know what." And then my teacher, let's say, was like, "Okay, you just sit back and let me run this ship right now." And I'm like, "Okay, but after you're done, if this doesn't work, we're going to the hospital
Yes,
because
yes,
I don't know what to do here.
yeah.
This is like freaking me out." And then after a while, you become more in tune with it. And as you know, you get into your space and you realize, wow, okay, this is reality. This is not the delusional state where people are like, don't dream about it, Johnny. Don't think like that. That's not. And I mean, when you regress back to it, you're like, I used to look through my hand when I was a kid. I'd look through
Mm.
walls, and it's a sensory perception, as you understand, right?
I had uh, it's so true, and it takes, I believe that when we develop this gift organically through, and it has been a lifetime of confirmation, of my own confirmation, not necessarily having to have confirmation outside of myself. And I don't know where that necessarily came from, where I didn't it's beautiful to get confirmation. My ego loves it just like anybody else, but I learned to know what truth feels like to me in my body. And then that was through meditation. It's not a light switch where we can just turn these gifts on necessarily always, right? But when we learn to know ourselves so fully, then we can then learn to connect to that outside space energetically. But when you just said that you, when as a younger child you could like look through your hand, it always makes me laugh, because in the same way as a little girl, I remember sitting on the sofa, and I still feel this way. It's so funny to me, but I know I can, it sounds so ridiculous, I know I can fly. I know that energetically I can go from this space and dimension to whoop. And so I
1000%. And I believe you. I don't believe you. I
yeah.
know right here that
Mhm.
it's absolutely
It
true.
was all I'd ever have to do is go with my little foot, and I knew I could just soar. It's a very, very interesting thing to do. And I think energetically we all do that. And so I had a dream it's probably been about 6 months ago. I bet it was around January, so longer, I guess. And I had a dream that I was running with certain family members, and I was like, we needed to go over this fence or over this gate, and I was like, come on, we've got to go to get to this next space, the next level, right? And to me, it's like consciousness, then that fifth dimension, whatever you want to call it. And we were running, and this person was like, I can't go. And I said, it's easy, we can fly, just do this. And she said, I can't do that. I'll stay with the other family member. And I took a breath in, I let go of their hand. And I proceeded to fly and go over the boundary of that fence and moved on. And that was a really interesting dream. I knew that it was telling me that I couldn't hold on to people and carry them with me necessarily, even just energetically. Could that be abundance? Could it be, it's in all forms? Sure.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting thing where that awareness, that understanding that we have, even when we're little, can give us such beautiful messages as we, are much older. So really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so beautiful too. So when you look at when you're approaching a session or a healing session with one of your clients, is I'm sensing it's very organic. You're just like, hey, if it moves this way, it moves that way, it moves that way, it moves that way, and then they walk out feeling whole and like enveloped in this unconditional love and
Mm.
just high frequency. It's like going through a car wash, and
I
then
believe, I believe,
this charge.
I believe that's exactly how they feel. I mean, I had a client just a couple of weeks ago who had purchased a gift certificate for a friend of hers who had recently lost somebody, and she brought her in. The other person sat on, outside of the session room, and when they left, later that evening, I received a phone call from her, and she said that they had to pull over on the way home because she was, so emotional in the most beautiful way. And she said, I feel like I just spent 30 minutes in heaven. And the healing that can happen when we're connecting to such a high frequency, 30 minutes is amazing. Of course, I do up to 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and 90 minutes, but it is incredible the change that can happen within that time frame, because being seen energetically for our true selves is something that doesn't happen easily for us, right? And so I believe that I can tap them into their energy, and they're able to
Mhm.
see it without any judgment, or they can see the truth so that they can then make, I always say, the better choice, or the higher choice of frequency for them. So I feel like a really good session very often tells them what they already know to be true deep within their soul. So it helps them get back to that that light within their being, that oneness, God source light, Buddha, whatever you want to call that for you.
Yeah, yeah.
It helps them get to that higher state of frequency. But you're right, connecting when a client comes in there, they always send me a message. And they're always saying, what do I need to do to prepare? And I say nothing. That you can meditate, you could come in, but for us, we just connect and we see what comes through. It's all very organic in that way.
It's
Mhm.
beautiful. It really is beautiful. So when you were doing the neural feedback, what
Mhm.
how did that help solidify your level of knowing?
Yeah, it's so incredible. And and with you, I feel like we have the opportunity, because I know you're into that too, right?
Yeah.
I know you get that.
Yeah.
Most people don't see the correlation. And to me, this spirituality, even call it science, call it math, it's almost like a perfect mathematical equation. It is all the same thing. We're trying to put labels and lingo to things that don't really need them in my mindset. But before I went into the neurofeedback business, I was actually in property management in Phoenix. There was a huge boom going on. All the apartments were turning into condos. It was amazing. It was a fun time. But I kept saying to my husband, I said, I want to do something with my gifts, my spiritual connectivity, all of this. And I was already painting. I was already painting energy and connecting with a few clients at that point. But I kept saying, I want to bridge, spirituality and science. I want to be doing like yoga and meditation and science in some way. And then all of a sudden this position was open. I saw it, and they could not have worded it. And it was calling for me. I know that. And started to work for them and was blown away. And because, first of all, I was coming from a place of also finally moving out of that anxiety, finally moving out of that panic attack, which I had done organically on my own through meditation, through my own spiritual and healing practices. But that brain state, that neurofeedback, was like, once that brain goes into homeostasis, then we can advance on to our true gifts and abilities and heighten our frequency. And it was a massive rush. And so there were other modalities that helped go hand in hand. I don't know if you've ever heard of TRE, Dr. David Berceli.
I I know that Nina does a lot of that, and then I was like, I wanted to understand it more. And to be really honest with you, all this stuff, as you know,
Mhm.
um, I could find a place in ancient indigenous practices that will correlate the core, because I always remind people, all thoughts of your mind are not yours. So
Yes.
you get this epiphany, and you create a system, and it's profound, and you bring it out into the world, and it's kind of like someone going, "Wow, more money, more problems. Wow, P. Diddy." No, that's actually Sting's riff. But
Yeah.
anyway, don't worry about it. That's another decade. And so people sort of come to that realization. And I was like, oh, that's a level of like Qigong. And she was like,
Mm.
wow, I had no idea. And it's like, it's all an expression. It just gets greater and greater and greater. So I was like, wow, this is really, you stumble across something and go, okay, I can just like blast the meridians and then have everything sort of unravel. That's kind of like how she explained it to me. I was
It
like,
Yeah, David, Dr. David Berselli is a friend of mine, and he actually was affiliated with them for a short time, but we were able to do neurofeedback and then the TRE and do all of those things. And it is quite amazing. That's a whole nother podcast probably, but to have, there were moments where, I'm connecting. I was starting to even connect to my guides and angels and loved ones while in the chair, the neurofeedback chair. So, I worked there. I had free sessions all day long. It was not a big deal. And I would grab a notebook and I just doodle anything that would come up for me. And so, yeah, I was absolutely connecting while in the chair. You could see it hit off the charts. With the mapping, the brain mapping, you could see it, and incredible downloads, connections with my father passed when I was 25, so connections with my loved ones. We all have the ability to do that. I think it's such a shame that people think that that we don't actually have access when we do. But
Yeah.
the TRE helped at a level. Neurofeedback was bringing certain things up. That were maybe scars from the past. We had a really major break-in. It could have been a scary movie, actually, in our home when I was a young girl, and none of us ever talked about. And that memory of that came up. And then it came up in my body through the TRE when I was going through those certain poses. And I called my sister and said, really weird. We never talked about this. I was like maybe 6 years old. And when I told her my experience, she said, Courtney, I was holding you down. I was like going into the fetal position when I was doing the TRE exercises. And she said, Courtney, I held you, ran down the hallway. We heard, it was a long story, screaming, all of that. And she held me down between the wall and the bed and hiding us. And I don't remember that part at all. And she helped me, but my body remembered. And so I believe that when we process those things, those scars that we all have in different various ways, our connectivity to the light, it's like peeling off the layer of that onion so that we can access the truth of who we are, right? And so it's incredible. So using all of the different modalities like your app and sessions, anything, all of those things in conjunction can be such an amazing thing.
Well, yeah, I know you just mentioned the app. I'm not doing a shameless plug, but there is a frequency, and I imprint and embed a frequency and a vibration into that. It's like kind of like when people. I just recently did a podcast with Sean Mike Kelly, and people are like, "Yeah, you can't bulldoze the house. It doesn't get rid of the ghosts. I don't know what you're talking about." It's like, first of all, I really appreciate your perception, and I know you have he's this particular guy has a channel that he chases after ghosts, but in reality, if you tuned into him as I have, he's extremely afraid of it and extremely skeptical. So he's never seen one, he's never experienced it, so he believes that that's not going to take place. But I can assure you, if you take any object, you will feel an imprinting frequency, vibration, and energy from that object that has been permeated with the owner or environment that is created. Even if it's a coffee cup,
Yes.
you can get so much information from this, it's crazy. And so when you have a conflicting lower vibrational frequency like the one I was speaking on, there is a level of when you break up that fractal pattern, because it is a fractal pattern, it's a pattern that is repeating itself. Yes. So if we're getting all quantum-y-ish, so how do you break that up? You break it up, and they were committed to breaking that pattern up. So when they bulldozed the house, the actual entity had no further reason to be there. And so there is a valid reason why you do these things, and it's not just, oh, well, it's a spirit, energy, and frequency. It can be anywhere at any time. This is also true, but then it will move on. I promise you, I've done it hundreds of times. And I'm pretty sure you can help validate that with me being someone that does this all the time.
I absolutely believe that. And there's a book, where is it? Right there. My old business partner and I, Within the Power of Universal Mind, we wrote in 2011, and it talks about, the car door handle is energy. This mouse is energy. This pin, and when it's all entangled together, right? But whatever we see it with is going to be matched with our own energy as well. And so for him, that when he says that can't happen, well, for him,
that's his reality.
That's true for him. And so that's fine. Love you, mean it. That's okay. And so that's why sometimes, again, we must let go of one's hand so we can go to the next level. right? Um,
Absolutely.
I worked for many years in the paranormal field, and that was before. And listen, and I honor that space. It definitely served its purpose in my life. I'm actually going to have a friend of mine on that I worked with years ago, or a colleague, and I'm going to have him on, and we're going to chat about paranormal and things like that on my podcast. But what's interesting to me is that it came a time where that energy was no longer something I wanted to connect with, because for me, I have little, at that point, my oldest was young, and it just will permeate your life, your existence. And I wanted a higher frequency of energy. I was connecting back to my innocent self. And within that connection is that bright. All my paintings are typically very bright and light-hearted, if you will. Now, very deep in information. It doesn't mean the information's not deep. Have lots of informations within the swoops and it's just
Oh yeah.
really, really cool how to see. Two people could get the same colors, the same movements, but the energy and the information for each client fits so beautifully and perfectly with them. It's much like a thumbprint. But I wanted to get out of that maybe a darker energy of connection. I wanted to rise in my own frequency. And so that's why I left that kind of world and went into another form.
No, and that's a really important thing for the audience to hear is, I was going to speak on, I think I heard you say something about in one podcast, it's like, oh, I was talking to my mother or someone, and I said, I don't want to be interrupted between here and here. I don't, I get up at a certain time. People need to understand that direct communication that you're having, as Courtney's speaking on, is absolutely valid. You create a parameter or none whatsoever. And I mean, just as you spoke on, hey, look, I've been there and done that. I literally can go 10 years without even experiencing a lower frequency. And
Yes.
when it comes in, it's like a fire sale. And I'm like, oh, okay. And people initially, when I started this stuff, because one of the Taoist lineages that I hold, I'm a 66th generation holder of. The founder of that particular monastery was an exorcist. And so he worked very closely with Lao Tzu, which is one of my teachers that I transmit every day. And he's the founder of Tao Te Ching, which is the most probably translated scripture in the history of the world. And so, you have this need to express that. And I really want the audience to understand how Courtney's like, okay, I've been there, I've done that. That frequency, if I don't put that signature out there, it will not find me. Just as your truth, your belief system, your understanding, and you want to operate in this higher frequency. And what happens is, for most people, Courtney and I can walk into a room and it's a divider because we're still operating in what people perceive as a duality. So people are going to love you or they're going to be repelled by you. It's kind of like, and that's kind of like a duality perception. But as you rise above that, all of a sudden people are like, oh, I made a really bad judgment call on what I thought you were or how you, and it's all just the frequency because they have to have their emotions come up. So if Courtney walks into a room, there's this blazing, polarizing energy that comes with her. And so now you're confronted with, do I want to deal with what I like to coin as the hillbilly hand fishing of emotional release. So
Yes.
they're all sitting there and you can just reach in and grab one and throw it out, or you can just sit in it, fixate on it, remind yourself you're a victim, get all in that sort of stuff and suffer the pain and the repetitive fractal patterns we were talking about that goes on. And it's like groundhog's just who you are. That's what you express. That's what's coming from your field. That's what's coming from the core of you. So there is that direct correlation where duality is really where most people are operating. And the goal for a Taoist is, two sides of the mountain, one's yin, one's yang. That's the polarizing opposites attract, and you bring it to a point and you realize you're at one with all. That's consciousness. And sort of people sort of like look at that. They go, oh, Buddhism, Taoism, it's the same. Actually, it's very dramatically different. A Buddhist would look at life and go, hey, guess what? Life is a pile of doo-doo covered in diamonds, and I want to take another diamond off, and I found some more doo-doo. because I need to be suffering. And
Mm.
then Taoists sort of look at life where pile of diamonds covered in doo-doo. I'm going to take some more. Oh, another diamond. It's good to be me. And guess what? This is exactly what Courtney talks about, which is you create your reality. And
Yes.
she's framing that. That's the really powerful part. It's so powerful. When you mentioned that, I was like, my goodness, I have to speak to her on that, because people don't understand that framing is literally your attention intention creating your reality. And that's as quick as it happens. It's not like, oh, I got to fire myself up and get in the lotus position and burn some incense and do all that stuff. I mean, you're working real time. You're actually working beyond real time when you're healing people. Like, people need to understand she's like beyond this time and space, and she's operating with all this information coming in, and it's expressed in that healing.
It is that to me. Well, thank you for that. It truly, and you do understand it, and so I really appreciate your wisdom there. What's interesting to me is, I've been focusing and talking about that breath, and when I say my breath, when I take a breath, I'm going from the tip of my toe, that full 4 count breath in, full 4 count pause. I always say thank you for the awareness that is mine. And I exhale out, and I always say thank you for being a teacher on my path to whatever it is, even if it's pain, even if it's hurt, because it's showing me something. It's showing me that I don't have to live within that space. But when I know to breathe is when I feel it, when a tightening, and that's teaching me what I'm connected to moment by moment. And so, yes, I do that with my clients, and you will even see me throughout even your podcast today. I stop. It's okay if I stop and take a full breath,
Yeah.
because I'm moving energy moment by moment. And so whether I'm doing that for a client or I'm actually doing it for myself within my own life. And so that's the thing. I think that when we are doing this work, it's so, in my belief, it's so dire to make sure that we practice what we preach, that we really show up and we connect, that we heal those things, but we also connect to that higher grid of connection of who we truly are, because nobody's going to do it for us.
Yeah.
It's up to us.
It's really beautiful. I mean, this is where I kind of lean on your respiration component is so powerful. And
Mm.
like, for people, as they start to level up their sensory perception, they'll come to realize when she takes a breath, I'm riding the tidal wave here of energy that's just like, whoa. And it's beautiful to see, because that attunement is a really refined mastery. And it's a mastery that comes, and what people come to understand through how I share with people is, as you level up, it becomes more finite. So, you mentioned my app, and I just
Yeah.
want to extrapolate on it, in a sense that it's imprinted with all the information and the frequency. So when someone's exposed to it, it uses a visual audible experience, creating that kinesthetic charge, which is the validator. That's
Mm.
what makes it real to the individual. And what happens is, I've done so many EEGs, it's like you go straight to gamma, and
Yes.
you're operating there. So you're at gamma. That means your brain is 100% enveloped, and that means that you can play with theta, alpha, gamma, highly conscious, highly pliable, highly creative. And this is a state that Courtney and I operate on. And if you have any expression of yourself, you realize that's what you're doing. So whether you're listening to music, or you're people just dismiss it, they don't realize it, but it's like, that's right there.
Yeah.
They're like, what are you talking about? Go find a song and find your peak. Find that song that gets you all fired up, and that expression is out there, and that signature, just like you and I experiencing that supercharge we're getting right now. And it's like, boom, it's like this shivering, quivering expansion that we're both having within our physical bodies. That is just insane, but it's an attunement. And that's that realization, that's that connection that you and I have. And we both understand that.
It's so true. I have to tell you a funny something too. It is true. And once we realize, and we're attuning to that breath, and we're connecting, letting go, of course, what no longer serves us within that space, to raise my vibration, especially if that's a hard something or a hard nothing. Doesn't mean we don't. Sometimes it's okay to witness that and be in that, to feel it. We're not pushing emotions or feelings away. We're not ignoring those things, but to rise in that frequency. and get back up there, I actually use a song. And so if I need some energy like pumping up, right, I will play a song. And you just said getting all fired up. In my song, it's almost embarrassing, but it's all fired up. And you said those exact words. It's all fired up from Pat Benatar from the 80s or early
Oh,
90s, whatever it
I
was. But
used
it's
to.
hilarious.
Now you have my heart. I
Yeah,
am an '80s nut. I can't help it. But
yeah,
it's like there are no coincidences that that synchronicity of those particular words
of
align with what
course.
happens to be the song that you use, right?
Mhm. It
For
is
me,
the exact song, and not many people know that. So yes.
and this is the incredible frequency that connects with people. It's like this is what takes place, and then you start identifying with these serendipitous, coincidental moments that are far from that, but it's a connection of frequency,
Yeah.
and people get all excited. For me, it's genuine. I'm good. I'm good with that. I can capture TLC. I mean,
Mhm.
they just get you right there, and you're high, and the
Totally.
expression is like every time I put on TLC, I get Left Eye coming to me, and she's like, "Yeah, that's right where I was expressing my pain, my hurt, my suffering," and that was emoted in that very chorus, and it looked like I was smiling, but I was in a lot of pain. But that power of expression, I was opening my heart to share with the world the power of what it is that I'm experiencing in my physical reality, and
Mm.
it comes out in the expression of their music. And gone too soon, but she's still with us.
Well, and she was a really powerful one too. I love that. Not many people know her depth either. And so I love that you connect with her in that way. That's really beautiful. I do believe that that's actually our purpose. You said purpose. And I have lots of clients that come to me that say, I want to find my purpose. I want to find my purpose. And very often they believe that that's an external something, the job, that am I to be a teacher? Am I to be a this or that? And I tell many people I've had major like judges, millionaires that run these, massive companies. I've had a neurologist. No, it was a brain surgeon, so I don't know that a neurologist and a brain surgeon is the same thing. But this particular woman, she's a very successful brain surgeon, and many people that are doing other things, but they haven't quite hit the abundance amount. And everybody's like, "What is my purpose? What is my purpose?" But I see the pain and the energy, and the people that many would think were the people who have excelled. They found the thing. They have the big house. They have the beautiful family, but their inside is that empty, dark place, that empty, dark hole. And they're all searching for the same thing, yet attaching it to something outside of themselves. And it is this work. It's connecting to, I believe, that artistic form, whether that's the dance, the song, the painting. When I started to paint, it was through a meditation, and that swoop of the head that I'm quite known for now was the first image that came to me. And I felt like an idiot painting that. And for me, I can paint, I can look at something and paint it perfectly. And I like perfect, straight lines, whatever. But when I'm connecting to source, when I'm connecting to my true heart within, it's abstract. And very often I'm like, a 3-year-old could do it. But that's what's so beautiful, because we really came to this earth well equipped with everything we needed. And that's
Yeah.
connection. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean for everyone else that is going to tune into Courtney's channel and her social, and then get to experience her artwork. I mean, it's palpable. It's
Thank you.
super palpable. It's so dense, and I appreciate that transmission, because there's it's like everything. It's kind of like we organically get it. Yes, I've got the foundation of things that I use, that I've been taught over decades through,
Yes.
being a lineage holder in actually 2 sects of Taoism. But that's not the point. Like when I first channeled 30 years ago, that was not, you know, that was kind of almost forbidden
Mhm.
within Taoism, because you're opening the doorways. But I instantly channeled Latsu, and it was like, holy moly. And he's been my teacher, my family ever since. I mean, you want direct source information, you get that. Just like, you know, you have your own source, your guides, or however you are receiving your information. And that is so important for everyone to get direct source. And
Mhm.
that's why that's why when I refer to the app and people are like, there's no way you can access your third eye and do it. I can guarantee you, my friend, you hit play on that thing and you're going to feel like you've had 5 pina coladas, a full body massage, and 10 days in the Bahamas. That's what happens on a physiological response. And that's the first validation for you as a human being going, I can't deny that. That's actually happened to me. And that's where you open the gateway. And then, of course, the more and more you open it, your brainwave is creating this, you're creating the environment to basically shoot off. And I mean, I get people that have had healing, spiritual experiences, all this stuff, and it's all a baseline. But the point is once you get in there, now all bets are off. You get true source information, and you are the one that is validating it. It's not Cortney, myself. And I mean, that's one of the things I really appreciate about you. It's like, I really need whoever I'm working with to be immersed and invested in their own development instead of just, coming to, Zoltar, the fortune teller, which is how some of us, and I mean, we've spoken on this off podcast, it does happen. And we appreciate that. I appreciate that. But there is a certain point where, I want to take the training wheels off. I want you to be able to ride your bike for your own healing, your own expression.
Well, and I believe that the work that we're doing here also, will help us. I know that it's helping our loved ones on the other side grow as well as we're growing. So every time we're doing this work, that energy is the whole that epigenetics is changing within your system, and there is something that can, I believe, can be measured if you're actually tracking your data, whether that's through whatever form you'd like. If you're tracking that, you're going to see, oh my gosh, when I received it was in this way. You're going to see it through, I believe, compounded steps. If you really want to see almost proof that you're growing in that way. And I do believe that there is such beauty within that. And it's something that really should not be ignored. When my clients come to see me, if they're not, crying, I'm like, you might as well not be here. And when I see them hold back the emotion. And so
right. They're suppressing it. It's so,
yes. And so if you're sitting here, if you're investing in your time with me, take a breath with me. And as I breathe through your session, as we breathe together, we're removing those, obstacles. And that can be a moment by moment thing. And somebody can take that throughout their life. And when we attune to that high frequency, eye-opening third eye moment, when they have that through your form of that app and there are other ways of connecting, that's an attunement that we now know. So at any time in our life, we know that we can then tune into that higher frequency of vibration because you already know what the frequency is. It's already within you. So anytime we've experienced that moment, we're more easily able to access it yet again. And then forever. Do you believe that?
No. I was just going to go, wow, what a profound observation, because that's exactly what, as you mentioned the app, I have what I call an Easter egg. So what happens is, you're not sitting there going, this first tier is 9. I've got like 2 years worth of material. But the first tier, literally by the end of the 9th week, you've mastered your emotions. You tell them to sit over there. They do whatever you tell them to do. And now you're in the game of your reality rather than your emotions controlling your behavior, which makes you suggestible. And then all of a sudden, you've got all this other transient stuff that's controlling your perception of reality. But first go, you do this once. And you can, what I call the Easter egg, you only have to experience the app once, and you can close your eyes, be in battled real world environment where you're not sitting there immersed in the app doing everything, but you cannot unsee what you have already seen, just as Courtney just mentioned, right? So what happens is they do the app once, and then you can go out, and I don't recommend it. Go and create conflict. But go and you will literally be able to stop, close your eyes, call in to experience the wave 126, and your whole body will start vibrating, just as Courtney was talking about. Once you've seen it, you cannot unsee it. So that's why it's really important, because when people are experiencing that, they're investing their time. They're like, well, this is 27 minutes a day. I'd rather do this or that. I'm like, I promise you, every second of every minute that you put into yourself will be rewarded because you can validate it and measure it on a daily basis. That's the key, is being able to measure your experience, your development. And just as, Courtney and I can go, bang, we're with, our spirit guides energy, whatever it is, that is a mastery that she and I have enveloped and mastered, this ability to instantaneously access something that, say, when you first start out, you've got your training wheels on. It
Yes.
might take you a minute to get to that level of development, but the pulpability, that energy, the frequency, the vibration that you're able to access, is like, someone would be like, oh, well, I'm doing a breathing exercise, and like, I need people to understand, when Courtney goes, okay, breathe with me, it's like you're being drawn into this tunnel of energy and then expanding out like to the universe. And that's just from her connection and her attunement that she has mastered over her experience in her reality. And what happens is, from a physiology, or if we're going to talk about science, because
Yeah.
we lean on it a bit, the mirror neurons within her body, you accept it. So, a lot of people, I don't try, that's a bad linguistic word of failure. I reach out to a lot of like mentalists, magicians, illusionists, because they use mechanisms that they just see it as a mechanism. It's like, oh yeah, hypnotize someone, whatever, they get in a trance and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't think you understand the level of frequency that you get to. And then they sort of use these other things that are more manipulative in linguistics sort of fashion, which puts someone into a state. And then the mirroring effect. So what's so powerful is, if we're watching a football game, right? We're on TV and everyone's like, yeah, or the song, as Courtney and I have talked about, or whatever it is and you feel your connection, whether you're watching The Notebook or, whatever it is, and you feel all that emotion, that is you attuning to those frequencies. And so when Courtney is talking about, once you see it, you experience it, it's so profound as someone who's sharing and imparting teachings, as a healer and a teacher. It's so profound, because that's what's taking place. I always tell people, once you attune with what I'm doing, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's on an app or whatever, you now have access to that. That means that you instantaneously, like this, can be at you can level up to your highest frequency, and don't allow people to limit your belief system. The old expression, suspension of disbelief. Let's suspend it permanently. Let's fire your disbelief and allow yourself, as Courtney talked about at the beginning of the podcast, childlike. And this is what I talk about. It's like, it's so funny. We're very similar, my friend. But I mean, it's like that childlike state means that face value, you're staying in a state, and children up to a certain level are just porous, where their own physiological development puts them in a place where they can attune to anything instantaneously, and you just watch it, right? I've got 5 kids with one on the way. They're all between, soon to be born next month and 11 years of age. And I allow my children to just immerse themselves in information. And so if my daughter wants to sing and dance or write a song or play a guitar, it's because I'm developing, I'm finishing up my Mandarin. I'll be fluent in it by the end of the year. And so acquiring is a word that they use within language learning. And so you acquire it, you immerse yourself. And this is kind of like what Courtney and I are talking about. It's there's a parallel there, where if you immerse yourself in these frequencies and you allow Courtney to express her highest frequency that she's sharing with you, you're going to get a healing that's going to rock your socks off. You're going to get a healing that's spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and it's going to happen instantaneously. Just as you mentioned, my friend, it's not like, oh, and I've watched this thousands of times. It's not like, oh, we'll get around to it, we'll work up to it, and eventually we'll get there, and after 5 or 10. No, if Courtney's connecting with you, you're not the same on a DNA level. Once you walk away from that healing, you have been altered. The frequency has been altered. The vibration has been altered. Your actual DNA your genetic code has been altered. And I don't want to say that like, oh my goodness, what does that mean? That's scaring me. No, you're
Up
expanding.
leveling. Yeah.
She's clearing all the stagnation that permeates your physical body, that will result in a manifestation of sickness, of physical representation of sickness. And by being in the space of Courtney, that just disappears. You're leveling up. Anyway,
It is something that from you do share it so beautifully, and I appreciate that, because you understand it on a quantum energetic level. And so when we connect with other individuals like myself, like you, that can show us what that higher attunement looks like with that frequency, again, we then by choice get, there's free will and choice. You then get to make the choice: do I want that, or do I want what has been? And so you make the choice to move through that next realm. And for me, it very often feels like a death and a rebirth. And so any growth, typically much of the growth, I know, feels difficult sometimes. And I know in my own life, when I'm like, oh, this feels a little, breathing it in, acknowledging it, showing gratitude for it, exhaling it out, feels like there might be a little bit of fear, or like, oh, we feel pressed when there's about to be change or evolution within that moment, maybe, right? But then what happens? That rebirth comes and we're not at the place that we were. And so I think what can help us is, if when things start to feel like, oh, we're becoming compressed in whatever form that is, physically, emotionally, energetically, we can actually show gratitude, because, ooh, I've been here, done this. I don't have to be in fear. I don't have to be in a place of lack, or that I'm not prepared for whatever this is. And when we allow that, let's call that childbirth to take place, that energetic rebirth, the what is it when you go into labor? The labor pains. I'm like, I've done it twice. What's the word? When we're moving through that, we acknowledge that after that expression, that letting go, comes that new form of a higher frequency of energy. And it many people are so fearful of losing what they've known that they don't even allow themselves to breathe and allow for them to get into that state of flow that is one with the universe. And very often I do see it as it's a passing of energy and coming back into that higher frequency. So it is within that breath. And so again, my clients, I had somebody yesterday morning who, very masculine energy, tough, big guy, and he starts to get emotional, and I believe he was quite shocked that he was going to be emotional. The reason people are emotional is because they're very, it's not often that we see ourselves and our pure energy and the connection to the divine, to our parents, our loved ones. He also had lost both of his parents on the other side. And when we can attune to that frequency of light, everything is connectable there. We can connect to everything within that connection of ourselves fully when we are in alignment with that. And so it's really beautiful. And it is a choice. It's a choice to connect to somebody who can help teach us the way to connect in that way, or do we just stay the same, which also in my mind means our next lifetime, what happens, we come back and do it again and again and again. But I don't know about you, but when I think of that breath, I'm doing that not just for the now, but for that next lifetime, if they're, and beyond. It's something that's quite transformable.
Yeah. I mean, and when people are exposed to yourself or myself or just anyone who is looking to help people level up in the consciousness, I just recently had a podcast with one of my guests, and he's an incredible motivator and does a lot of marketing for many people. But it was like this moment I sat there and I'm talking to him, and he's very much in line with God and Jesus and profound. Like it's just expressed through his every breath, and he's so in tune with that frequency. And I'm like, wow, that's really beautiful to see, watching Jesus move in and out of his field, and just the elevation of that frequency as he speaks. And then all of a sudden, one of his, past lives were very present, and who he really was a representative of in a reincarnation in this life. I was like, so what do you think of, reincarnation? He's like, well, I like the concept. I've just never read anything within, the the Bible that would reflect on that as being, true. I said, okay, well, if I ask you, who do you think you're a reincarnation of?
Mm,
You think it would be? And he was about to say it. I said, stop for a minute. I can see who you are. And are you ready? And he goes, yeah, you're a reincarnation of Martin Luther King. And he just died. He was like, that was what 10,000% what I was going to say, because he was just so profound with he's so articulate, he's so effortless, he's so flowing. And it was like an expression of, just like you and I getting that supercharge of energy right now, all through our whole bodies. And we're just like, this is the moment. And it's like, it is registered as a profound thing. And, and as you level your sensory perception, you get to see these things. Like for me, it was sort of like, I just had a moment where the light switched on and everything looked like a computer screen. Everything has an aura. Everything has energy. You just look at it. And because you're in tune with that consciousness, you're not like going, can you please give me that information? Because you are the consciousness. You just go, here we go. Bam, bam, bam. And it just all comes in. And Courtney, I'm sure, could attest to this. As you refine your skills, you can it's literally your imagination is limiting your simulator of how you want to receive this information.
Absolutely. And getting really clear with ourselves and knowing that we are worthy of that access, I think, is such a big thing too. And I know I'm seeing a lot of people come to me wanting to take ownership and know that they are worthy now to step up. I have a question for you. Do
Yeah.
you feel like do you feel like I know we've all been seeing this massive awakening, right?
Right.
The work that you and I do is quite expansive, but there's so many different teachers around the world. Do you feel like in the past 2 or 3 years, it is excelling because the planet, the world, this energy is really demanding for all of us to take our space now?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can feel it leveling up from how the Earth is interacting with the universe and how that magnetic field is a representation of our magnetic field. It's just from a Taoist, this is the Earth, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
and so when you align yourself and realize that that resonating first peak of frequency, and this is where I kind of my personality self gets out a little bit, because everyone goes, "Oh, is that Joe Dispenza?" Oh, please stop,
Yeah.
please. You got to stop for a minute, please. I appreciate Joe Dispenza. I value him. I value all the guys from Greg Braden to all these people. But understand these indigenous practices have been around tens of thousands of years. Just to validate the neural network that's there, that's how you kind of get a better understanding. Does that make sense? It's like
Well,
I get a
it's
little. They're like, "Oh, is that a Joe Dispenza?" I'm like, "Please, please."
well before Joe Dispenza is, and again, appreciate, love,
Yeah,
all of the great teachers, but that's what we're here to do. But we're I know I'm teaching, much of it is through my own knowing, much of it is through my own awareness. But to think that we haven't been connected all together with the same information and plug into this source connectivity, so that the world needs to hear it through each and every one of us. And so
yeah.
before Joe Dispenza, there was another person and another person and another person. And so yeah, for sure. And so even when I speak about neurofeedback, that was so many years ago, where it wasn't mainstream like it is now.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
something still you had to be very careful, because you couldn't say different things, because you would be shut down or whatever. You couldn't say it was healing or anything like that. But when the brain is able to, first of all, see itself, the brain is such a powerful thing. It can create new neural pathways to start to find the easiest way to get from point A to Z. And so rather than us having, what I needed was, apparently I needed the anxiety, the panic attacks, whatever, for me to learn to access my own breath, my own connectivity. My brain was like, Courtney, you don't have to have all of those other symptoms to go from point A to Z. You can, now that you know this frequency, this how to get there immediately, I can attune to it, letting go of those symptoms that no longer serve me, which can be, brain fog. And, sleep is such a massive deal. So it can help us sleep. And, it all has its place, but you are the person that has to say yes to that growth. And so to even allow yourself to be open to do something like that, that can help you build new neural nets or new neural pathways.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's a really valid point that Courtney makes. And on another like subconscious, unconscious level, we need to also understand that that programming is taking place all day long. So you may not. This is where the people get the epiphany or the deja vu, and so consciously, you know, you may be unconsciously you may be taking in anywhere between 140 200,000 points of information all day every day.
Mhm.
You're aware of 7 and you retain two, whatever. And so, people are like, whoa. And so, I find that's why I find it intriguing to look at mentalists and mentalists, even though we may refer to if I had your good friend Billy Carson here,
Mhm.
he would be more like, okay, that's a hermetic type of thing in of itself, but that's got a foundation of the brain is the universe is the brain, and understanding that from a law of universe methodology and process. But they're talking about mentalism in a perception and sort of like illusion state. So they use that title and they go, oh, that's really cool. But I'm like, I can project a thought form into your mind, no problem. I don't need to see. What they do is they'll be like talking to you, and they might have literally a microscopic like word on their hand you cannot see. Like with your
Uh-huh.
naked eye, you can't see it. And all I have to do is do this and this. And then, so I want you to think about something. And like now we're priming your thought process and leading you in a way where your unconscious from your peripheral has already seen that information. And then they set you up. And then let me see, I'm, I'm thinking about it. Let me, Apple. And you're like, how did you know that? Because they set you up. And so this happens all the time with mentalists, and a lot of them, they don't like me and do like me, and they're like, oh man, you're that weird Taoist mystic guy that wants to. Because I want to understand, how can you not be beside yourself, even in something as simple as a hypnotic trance that takes someone to a different state. You can create a reverse hallucination where literally you have everyone's done it. I got my keys in my hand. Where are my keys?
Oh,
Where are they?
yes. Yeah.
Oh, oh, they're right here. And so being able to shift in that consciousness, because it
Classes.
is right, it is a consciousness, and people dismiss it. They're like, well, if I get hypnotized, I must be an idiot. No, you are super powerful.
Mm.
If you can drop into a trance like that, and then someone can teach you how to drop into a trance like that, oh, you are all powerful. You're going to get into states of creativity, healing, manifestation like this. And
Mm.
so it's like understanding this inner working, and the way that so so beautifully put, the way Courtney expressed that, it's like it really is. It's like this is sort of like how people need to level up. And I personally believe myself and yourself, we were given this background in the quantum physics model as a
Mm.
language, because I always remind people, be very aware, this is a language that's only 300 or 400 years old, or
Yeah.
not even. Quantum physics is about 100. And so, it's like, it's a language. And
It
like, so,
it's so frustrating sometimes. And I will say, real side note, at the Forbidden Knowledge New Year's Eve party last year, we did have an illusionist, and I cannot remember his name, but he was on one of the shows, and so he won something. But he was amazing, and so now I'm sitting. Now I want to go play that trick that you just told me. So
oh
now,
yeah, I mean, and you see, so they set all this stuff up. We can go deeper into it, but then I'll probably be lynched by a bunch of magicians that are like, "You're releasing all the secrets." I'm like, well, yeah, I don't want to pop a pin, but offline, I'll share them all with you, and all of a sudden, you become very mastery. But there are also things that once you and I have seen it, we can actually do it from that energetic level without. It's like and that's where the part where I'm like, guys, you're using it and you're like, this is just a mechanical thing. It's stupid. No, you can access it if you understand anything about quantum physics. And they're like, well, I don't really believe in that. Really? Do you have a cell phone? Do you have a laptop? Do you have the internet? That's quantum physics. What? What are
one
you
of my
talking
one
about?
of my favorite quotes is, what is observed is changed. And so once it is science, this my healing work, my sessions, once a client understands the energy, we move through it. they see it. And so once we see it, once we say, that doesn't quite work for me, we at least can then make choice later, whether that's emotional, physical, energetic, whatever that choice is, to either continue to dance with that, whatever it is, or to move it to that higher frequency. So that is one of my favorite quotes, is what is observed is changed. And you were talking about language or linguistics earlier, and I think I said this maybe right before we started this beautiful podcast, but the words drive me crazy. And that's all I do all day long with my clients and on my own podcast, is I talk all day long, right? What would be so much more beautiful is if we could just feel the vibration of each other and the colors that bounce back all day long. Because then I've got a remote here. If I could just hold a microphone to my head, the sessions, as amazing as they already are, would be so much more amazing, because you're really only getting 70-30, maybe even 50-50 of the information that I can even put into language to another. So that energy shift, when we get into that stream and you're in a session, there's no language for that different effect that it can take. And there's no language for that different realm of connection from where we are right here energetically into that quantum leap of where it helps us come here. Now, if we keep, insistent on drinking our woes away or whatever, I'm not against having a drink here and there, but if we're doing things that do not serve us, we are going to sometimes maybe tumble back. But because you have attuned to that energy at one point, I believe it's easier for us to pick ourselves up energetically and say, okay, that tumble work does not work for me anymore. I'm wanting to grow. This is my purpose. This is my intention. This is where my faith lies. And we come back to that space of knowing, and we get to decide to do that, to be willing participants with our own energy.
And that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, poetic, the way you mention that, because really, I help people identify, and I feel in my heart, I know you do the same. It's like understanding the external forces, what you're able to accomplish internally is a million times more powerful than any drug externally on the face of the earth. And people sort of like go, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, a lot of people I've observed, it is very popular in the last 10 years. I've noticed it's like, I got to do, I want to ascend. I got to do mushrooms. I got to do acid. I've got to do, when I was, and I'm not dismissing it, because there's a place and time for everything. So how I see it is, understand you are not the drug. So this is the biggest issue that I find when I have people that are addicted to something, whether it's drugs and alcohol, sex, whatever it is. You are not that. It is a tool to put you where you need to be in your consciousness. Then you come to a moment of realization that no longer serves you a value, right? Just as Courtney was just saying, it's of no value anymore. And then you move to a higher level of consciousness. And so when people look at it like that, they're like, oh, am I not John the alcoholic? No. You use that alcohol to distract you from your reality, because you felt as though that simulation of pain was too much to address it. And now, just by being present with Courtney and myself, that frequency opened up. You released that, it unraveled, and you feel expansive, and there isn't a drop of alcohol that's going to even replicate or come close to how you're feeling as one with everything. So then you get to that next level. It's like, okay, I need to do, ayahuasca, LSD, whatever. And I said, look, there's a time. I'm not going to dismiss this. Look, I know I'm fully aware of teachers that literally are in China right now, not from my monasteries, but I've met them in certain parts of China. Within my monasteries, we just eat vegetables and, get high on our own supply. But I've come across some gurus that literally will sit there and smoke a bag of weed, and they're 110 years old, and they look like they're like 18, Sprite, fully alert. And that's where I go to. You can turn water into wine, just as they talk about Jesus turning water. That is possible with your intention, which reflects back to what Courtney was talking about with the epigenetic model. Understanding that you are a product of your environment. Your environment changes your gene expression. And so that whole thing is where we get deeper into it. So people are like, I put a video out just recently, and someone's like, I don't get it. I'm like, well, epigenetics in of itself means above the gene. So everything external is altering your gene expression, and it can be changed instantaneously. What do you use as the culture medium that is the tidal wave, that is the messenger, is your blood. And what are you creating the message of? A thought, feeling, and emotion that ripples into that blood, and it transports it to whatever it is that you want, however you think or feel and express emotionally. That is now generated in your reality. And this is how, epigenetics works on a much deeper level for people that are sort of like, well, they're talking about this stuff. It sounds a little woo-woo.
Right.
Well, no. I mean, when you understand it, it's like, okay, you're around, you go into a room and someone you can say, oh, man, whoa, this kind of feels a little muddy. It's like putty, lower vibrational. And I can see my girlfriend over there looks like she's got a frown on her face. She's really upset. I get to her and she's like, yeah, my boyfriend cheated on me yesterday. I was like, ooh, okay. And so you're super angry. Yeah, I want to kill him. No, you don't want to do that. But let's just like, why don't we check? Just as if I was Courtney, I'd be like, okay, take a breath in, right?
Always.
And like, but that for people that are not attuned,
Mm.
and there's a level where you start with a level of protection. But I always tell people, look, understanding that if you're at one with all and you are me, I am you, what are you protecting yourself from? And people are like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Well, I'm sorry, but like high level ascension, consciousness is all things. Well, I can't be afraid of myself. You're
Right.
me. So whether you've got leprosy, cancer, the most incredible sickness that you've ever imagined, I'm going to cast that wicked away. I'm going to draw you closer. We're going to disband, dispel, viscerate, destroy that energy. They sound like big words, but I mean that's what happens when you bring the stuff, when you bring the frequency, when you bring the energy, when you bring the vibration. It's gone. It's got nowhere to hide. It can't hang out. It's just like it's gone.
Has to
But
be clear. Has to be clear. I say something in my own life constantly is I just have to say it out loud. So if I feel it and I notice it, I express it so it doesn't sit within my energy. That can be good, that can be hard things. And a lot of people have been taught, I know where I'm from, that many people, it was always, let's just be polite, sugar coated, nicey nice, blah, blah. Ugh, I can't take
put it
this.
inside.
Yeah. And nope, I express it. I'm clear so that everybody knows where that boundary is. But I love when we can do that for ourselves. I so love when somebody can say, no, Courtney, that doesn't work for me. Or, hey, nope, I hear you. But when they can express their own oneness, when they can express their own beauty, I love and so value that, because when I see it, it reminds me, oh, I can do that for myself as well. And so we are all each other's mirrors. And that is a very hard lesson for some to realize that, oh, wow, that ant, whatever, that's, yeah,
Right.
is it within her that is mirrored back within you? And so
Right.
it helps us surrender to saying, well, I have to make sure I'm working on my own stuff so that the world even changes around me. It's really up to us to do our own part.
Yeah, and I mean that's beautiful. I mean, when you mention mirror, within Taoism we have like mirror magic, and you go deep into that where you're replicating. I mean, I would spend hours on the Taoist practices, and I mean, you can always find a correlation. It's like, okay, this is a Taoist practice. This is what people are doing. This is the scientific version. This is the spiritual version, and it just sort of like, oh, this kind of like all works together. But I mean, when you say mirroring, you literally are mirroring. So it's like those mirror neurons are literally replicating the experience that you're having. So, another little trick, and I do this a lot with my kids. It's like, okay, we're going to bed. We've got like 7 people in the household. It's 9 o'clock. And they're like, what are we talking about? And I'll be like, okay, turn the lights out. Now, all I want you to do is just lay down and just listen to dad for a minute. And then all I do is I sync with the youngest one. So I get her respiration, her heart rate. Once I got her, I then I go around the room. And then once I sync all 5 of them, it's lights out. And I go, good night, boom. And they're all down for the count, deep sleep, and they stay asleep, because that's how fast you can synchronize anything. And so that's that mirroring effect. And so on a mentalist level, this happens a lot. Okay, this is another little handoff. You can go into a cafe and sit there and watch someone and start replicating their behavior. And within a few seconds, you've now connected what they call, what we would call in sort of a psychological shrink sort of setting of stroke hypnosis. Just take it another level. You're creating a psychodynamic loop, which for you and I would be, we're now expanding and connecting on a higher frequency, and now you're experiencing what I'm experiencing, whether it's a past life or they're getting the visual effects, the information, the energy. But from a psychologist perspective, because I like to have all these things.
Oh,
and so the psychodynamic loop has taken place, and you can literally play puppet master to entertain yourself by sitting there, scratching, and you're like, whoa, that person just scratched their shoulder. Holy moly. And it only takes a second, because you validate the respiration, and someone who's as sensitive to the energy as you are, you can tap into the energy, and people are like, how could you do it? But you didn't get permission. I'm sorry, but that's not how the universe works. It's a moral compass that people tend to get on. And if you believe it, then that's what it's framed in. And I attest 1000%. If someone creates the permission perception, that is valid for them, and that should be their very perception of their reality. And do not take from that, because I always remind people, when you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. Right. And it comes down to that foundation. So, but the facts are, you can tap into anything at any point, and that's the thing that sometimes freaks people out. It's like, hang on a second, whoa, what are you saying? You didn't get my permission to do that. You're going to burn in hell. Well, perhaps in your reality, someone will, but I'm only ever ascending to a higher frequency. But a lot of these people do this, like mentalists do this all the time. This is how they command an audience, where they're able to create illusion, and you're like sitting there and there's 1,000 people, and they go, pull out the card. Now take the card, and but everyone's got the same. How did you know that number? Oh my goodness, because they created a psychodynamic loop with the whole audience. And this is moreover at any sort of, whether you're at a concert, whether you're at a football game, whether you're at, this is how people get people's attention. And more so, even within a religious environment, this is what happens. And people are like, that's good or bad? Well, it depends on where you're at and what you're doing with it.
And the person's intention, right?
Exactly. And quite frankly, if you don't believe it, which most of these people don't, it never transpires into anything. It only holds up as long as back in their unconscious and what they truly believe, they want to validate it. And the truth is that karma in of itself, and how I've helped people understand it, is what you believe. So if you walk under a ladder and you believe you're going to make $1 million once you walk through the other side, then that's exactly what's going to take place. But if you walk under that ladder and go, oh man, I got 3 days of bad luck, and I'm looking out for it, that the universe is like, I got you. Oh, here it is. I got you, because we're not doing moral compass things. It's present moment. This is your gift. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. And people are like, but I did this manifestation thing and it didn't happen, because on a much deeper level, you are suppressing an instantaneous result, because you haven't validated it enough. And that's why I always say, do the parking ferry. And people are like, what is the parking ferry? I'm like, okay, go. All right, I'm going somewhere. I need a parking space out the front. Boom. And what happened?
Yes, it works. That is the most beautiful thing ever. Yes.
Right. And so I always get them to do that as the first taste test. It's like, let's give you a little taste. And once you've done it 47 times and your skeptical self is like, maybe there's something to this. Oh, it's just a coincidence because it was at the front of a mall, but it's in a stadium, it's in an arena, it's wherever I go, it materialized, because why is that? And they're like, well, why does that work? And then I want to manifest $1 million in my boyfriend, and it doesn't happen, because there's no emotional content to it. Yes. You and I can attest to this, and I'm pretty sure Cortney will say the same thing. A high level of healing, we're not involved in that. We're not looking for an outcome. We're not going, oh, my reputation is bound by this person going, they had the most mystical, magical experience. I'm not I don't have any investment in the outcome. And when there's no investment in the outcome, the frequency just comes right in.
It's
It's like I'm not looking to impress you. You came for a healing. I'm going to give you the healing, but I'm not looking to have you validate it. And that when you can get to that place, and I know Courtney's talked about, I know it's taken me a while to accept that I can access this, but
mm,
now you've accepted it. You just bring you, and you bring in that frequency, and people just have these miracles that just take place, and you're like not going, well, I need to make sure that they heal themselves and they find their mother and they do that. That's not how Courtney's approaching it. She's just bringing herself in. She's opening the floodgates, and this stuff is just like coming down on you like a spiritual evolution. I'm
mm.
sorry.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a connection. They feel it. The non-attachment to the outcome is the way that I operate in my life for my own specific self. And it is absolutely when we can release the attachment to even the messages that come through in a private session or the connection, we can know what makes sense today. But I always, throughout my sessions, it's so multidimensional, even the message, the language. And it's just super cool when you step back and you say, I don't know, we connect and we see what comes through. And sometimes that annoys people because they're like, no, I want to know specifically exactly. And I can tell you, we can go there, but that just almost gets in the way. You've got to just allow yourself to receive, be open, and what is supposed to come through comes through. And very often, I will tell you in a session, I'm sure this happens with you too, is what's supposed to come through always does. And so their attachment to the outcome, I believe, is always, well, the outcome is always so much more beautiful when they let go of what they think it's supposed to be. And it's always typically bigger. You know what I mean? And so it makes me go back to that song from Garth Brooks, Thank God for Unanswered Prayers. Think of the things in our own life where, man, we really wanted this X, Y, or Z to happen, and this has to happen, or life isn't going to be that way. And those relationships, those positions at career, those whatever that is, didn't come through, and life was so much more beautiful and grand than you could have ever realized. Well, with every breath, a moment of my own connection, I'm always breathing and seeing it almost rise to that higher dimension, that higher frequency, because I know that that's the direction my life is going without any attachment to how it has to be. And it's pretty amazing when we look back and we're in the roles that we are. There was no plan, Courtney, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Da, da, da. It just, when we get into that stream of flow, it happens and it takes us where it's supposed to, and it's quite beautiful.